to empire. Slavo, you wrote something that struck me as dramatic. You said 9/11 had put an end to the utopia of liberal democracy as a global dominant idea. Why is that?
We can see now that liberal democracy was doomed from the very beginning. It was strictly a utopia, but for contingent reasons, that uneasiness with liberal democracy acquired its symbol. It could have been another symbol, no? Acquired its symbol in September 11.
A huge, dramatic.
Yes.
But what is it about 9/11 that put an end to that idea?
You are now already falling into a certain ideological trap, I would say. There is nothing immanent in it. It's like asking why Jews were chosen as object of anti-Semitism. No, the system has a need for a certain embodiment of enemy, and for contingent reasons somebody speak up. It's the same here, probably because people identified new world order with financial capital, and the Twin Towers were a symbol of this and so on.
But what I'm trying to get at is, was it 9/11 that put an end to the utopia of liberal democracy, or was it September 12 and the war on terror?
That's a nice point, and I will give you a precise answer. That 9/11, when it happened, was nothing, just a big, relatively big, worse things are happening, from Bhopal catastrophe in India and so on. But it's, of course, September the 12th, because, events mean nothing in themselves, necessarily.
It's the interpretation,
yes, the echoes
the
create.
exploitation.
Yeah.
And so you think the war on terror, as a framework, as an imperative, has put an end to the utopia of liberal democracy?
In the long term, capitalism and democracy needed each other. Even that marriage is now approaching divorce. The most efficient capitalism today, contemporary global capitalism, has at its ideal political forum no longer liberal democracy but a more authoritarian order.
First of all, we should not fetishize liberal democracy as if until 9/11 everything was hunky-dory about liberal democracy. Histories of pogroms and Holocaust and global colonization, all of this, women, underprivileged, this is all part of the history of liberal democracy. The thing that is specific about 9/11 is the spectacle of violence. Violence becomes spectacular right here. It is performed for television, it's performed for visuality. The violence has always been part of revolutionary process, always, from Marx to Sorel to Fanon. Always we have had violence, but violence for a specific revolutionary project. This was a violence that had no revolutionary project, was only for the show, and it was reciprocated.
What is it, postmodern?
It was for a show. It is just for a show. It has
is it the moment where liberal democracy met globalization?
Liberal democracy had met globalization with the collapse of Soviet Union, the beginning of unification of Europe, creation of a monopolar capital, George Bush II saying that now we are in a new world order. So that is when the globalization became massive labor migration around the world, decentered capital, etc. This gave it, the 9/11 gave it a spectacular visual register that made it palpable that when with the US invasion of Iraq and the expression shock and awe was verbally what this was visually. So yes, there is no doubt that there is a turning point in history. That turning point for me is the exhaustion and end of the metaphor called the West. The world is at its ground zero, literally, to begin to regenerate political virtue. So yes, 9/11 is a moment of epistemic shift, if not epistemic rape.
But could we also then define that moment of September 11, September 12 as a moment when democracy was once again searching for a new enemy? Communism has ended. There was no unifying threat out there. At one point they called it Islamofascism. They were talking about a fourth world war. Is that necessary for democracy to create that kind of a spectacle?
The key question is, of course, here, where does this urge to look for an external enemy come from? This is also the important lesson of anti-Semitism in Europe. Why did capitalism need the figure of the Jew? It needed it to cover up its own antagonisms. And it's the same here. The point is not, is the other, the enemy, really as bad as we think? The point is, why do we need that figure of the enemy? We should ask ourselves, and here...
So what you're saying is Western democracy was in crisis at the moment?
Absolutely. No, I never believe in empires, very rarely, practically never fall apart because of the external enemy. Or to be a little bit melodramatic, the real threat to European identity today are not Islamofascists, are Europe's own right-wingers. Imagine a Europe where people like Le Pen and so on are in power. This is the end of all that maybe has some worth
The
in
same
European...
thing can be said of the United States.
Yeah, absolutely,
With its own
yes.
radical fundamentalist
Yeah.
Christians and
Yeah.
conservative
But
and so on.
Marwan, if I may just interrupt. See, Le Pen, etc., the European fascism, neo-Nazism, etc., precisely on the logic of the Jew as the internal enemy, now Islamophobia is the reverse, the other side of the creation of the enemy outside. The Arab, the Muslim, the Chinese, the whoever, is also contingent on the operation of the capital to conceal its own contradiction. That contradiction has not disappeared after 9/11 by virtue of globalization, but has become amorphous. It doesn't have a fixed location.
How much is it a question of a crisis? And how much is this a question of the elites in the West reproducing once again? They did that in the colonial era, they did that in the Cold War, and they need to reproduce themselves and regain more authority and more power. And this is a helpful...
A very good question. It's clear that our political leading class elite has lost its ability to rule. They have basically no vision and so on. It's just horrible what is happening.
Well,
there.
certainly after 2008, it was clear that the elites, especially the political elites, are in crisis. Isn't it something like the war on terror a great justification and alibi then to regather power, authority, create a Patriot Act, create a certain surveillance, create the impression of fear, and then
But
gain
that's
more
the
authority?
saddest thing about it.
And
No.
hence compromise democracy.
But isn't this so sad? The predominant forum today of politics is what I call the politics of fear. We no longer have positive visions. We have, the fear of the immigrant. Unfortunately, even much of leftist politics works like this. It's the fear of the big capital. It's the fear of ecology and so on. It's as if we are threatened and we don't have a positive project. Just the only way to mobilize people is to make them experience fear. This is very sad.
But this is incredibly important.
Yeah.
So is this the new paradigm? That it's no longer the projects of hope, the projects of expansion, that now the new paradigm is the one about fear. Fear of losing a job, fear of an unknown enemy,
Fear of immigrants,
fear
fear
of
of
threats.
internal enemy.
It is in
fearing
a way.
of the fifth column, the Muslim
Of course.
communities.
It is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. When you have such a radical militarization, look at Ferguson. I mean, this is just a small town in the United States. When you look at the face of American police that they are supposed to help people to have a safe life, with this incredible militarization, already fear, whether it's the fear of a young black man or the fear of something called ISIS, which is and the ISIS is playing on it. ISIS, in my opinion, by and large, is a visual performance.
What's the beheading on television?
Yeah.
But
First of all,
amplifying the
First
Although
of all-
it has a nice irony, did you notice that the orange dresses of the prisoners
Of course,
are copied from Guantanamo?
and also waterboarding.
the idea that you could instill that kind of fear in a society and make it as an organizing principle, and you hold the keys as a political elite who lost all legitimacy on other grounds, that certainly bodes terribly to democracy.
Yeah. The problem is how to get out of this, and it's not simply let's return to some authentic democracy. How? What do we really decide today? All the big wars, Iraq and so on, it's clear that they were decided before secretly. Secret agreements are more and more important.
So now we added another layer to fear.
The fear
secrecy.
but fear is more or less justified at a certain level.
And then we have secrecy.
Secrecy is more
Secrecy
and
in
more
economic
important.
agreements.
Yeah.
Secrecy in
And this secrecy, that's the
in
tragedy,
policing measures?
works perfectly with the way we understand them personal freedoms. People tell me, why focus on the United States? They are much less free in China. Yes, but in China at least they don't give the illusion that they are free. You can do certain things with American freedoms, but the horror of United States is that you can experience yourself as free and you are still totally controlled. That you don't even experience your unfreedom.
But do you agree that 9/11 and 9/12 has even accelerated this process of an illusion of freedom, of an illusion of safety, of an illusion of happiness? Because at the end of the day now, unlike under the Cold War, when you knew where the enemy was, now apparently the enemy is unknown.
9/11, Marwan, is the exacerbation of a long process.
Can we say that it's an eruption of history as well or not?
Oh, absolutely. Overriding paramount metaphors of world history up until 9/11 was the West and the rest. This was the paramount metaphor. 9/11, I completely concur, put an end to that metaphor. This is the key moment that the West no longer has intellectual, moral, imaginative, philosophical hegemony. This is my contention.
But could we also say that because of we're in the midst of the so-called age of globalization, meaning we're towards a more technological revolution and so on and so forth, we are in the age of empire, at least since 9/11. At least since 9/11.
Are we? In what sense? Which is the empire? I think that every leftist should contribute money to build a monument to Bush, the son, because, you know, with Clinton, of course it was an illusion, but there was still at least this illusion that America can be the sole superpower playing. The result of 8 years of Bush presidency is that United States are simply maybe still the strongest state, but reduced to one player among others in a much more multi-centric world. And that's the eternal service to humanity of Bush.
So the war on terror is no longer just used by the West and by the Bush. But I mean, the ultimate use of the war on terror is happened by the likes of Putin.
And Chinese and so on, practically everyone.
And Egyptians and whatever. So is it the new organizing paradigm worldwide?
You know what this enables you to do? On behalf of universalism, of human rights global system, you totally dehumanize the other. If we are in a nation state situation, we are enemies. But still, I have to respect you at least formally as an enemy state. But the enemy of terrorists, of when your enemy is a so-called terrorist, it's not even another legal institution, it's just a nobody out of humanity in a certain way.
This is the condition that then you have this massive security state and intelligence state and cyberspace, that we are no longer even physical human beings. We are our representation in the cyberspace. And the control of the cyberspace, which means the simulacrum of humanity, deprives us not only of the nation states as a unit, potent unit, but also of our humanity.
In terms of the nation state, in terms of the pre-9/11, all the eggs are broken now. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan.
But Libya, which also fell apart as a state.
So all the eggs are broken. Where's the omelet?
There is no omelet. No, absolutely.
Where's the everything was done in the name of democracy.
No. I mean, the only omelet that I can see is for humanity in general. We are at a new imaginative geography that no longer has a center.
This is our maybe sad future, this unheard of mixture between very wild capitalism and some kind of a cultural fundamentalism and so on, where we are getting, as it were, the worst from both.
They work together.
The worst together, yes.
But you know, for me, still the big elephant in the room is the wave of revolutionary uprisings in the Arab world, in Europe, from Greece all the way to Spain, in the United States, right here in Zuccotti Park. These were a series of not entirely organically related, but nevertheless simultaneous events that were happening. So to me, this is still a passing moment. Is a stratagem, is a distraction.
So now there are two narratives: the counter-terror narratives, the fear, the security, the secrecy, and the revolutionary, democratic grassroots.
Because look at this. What ISIS has done has shifted the landscape of the world away from urbanity towards the beheading of somebody in the desert.
This is crucial.
So you agree that those who are presumably defending democracy from terrorism, those who want to spread democracy to combat terrorism, are undermining democracy?
Absolutely, and the crucial example is what you said. This Arab Spring, European protest movements, they simply don't fit this big narrative, liberal, tolerant democracy against fundamentalism. My paradox is that when you adopt the standpoint of this authentic emancipatory movement, you see the secret complicity of both sides, of Western liberals and so-called fundamentalists. We have to step out of this opposition. It's a false opposition. They feed on each other.
Can we say now that democracy is being undermined daily in the West, in democracies themselves?
Yes, but you know what's crucial here? This non-democratization of key social economic processes fits perfectly with our false sense of personal freedoms and so on.
Well, on that note, thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.
You are terrorist, you are liberal democrat, I'm the spring.
You're the radical.
And I
The
say,
Marxist.
kill both of you.
Yeah.